With this here, this ain't about being flashy. This is game day, son. It's only about one thing. Getting that W. That's the only thing that matters right now. Boy, you ready?
The past is the past, you know? It's a new day, bro. My day. You gotta do it now.
Blindside Fantasy Football Podcast, back for another episode. We got Matt back finally this week. He was gone last week on a nice little vacation, nice and relaxed and fresh from his vacation. How's it going, Matt?
Great. Definitely had a good time. Missed all the football talk. I didn't have as much access to, so it's good to be back and getting back in the podcast world.
Yeah, you missed out on the good Google Hangout we had last week with some of our writers.
But yeah, I watched some of that. It was a good time. Something I'm looking forward to doing in the future. But geez, I don't know if I want everyone to see my ugly mug.
Yeah, I felt the same way, but I quickly got over it and told myself that no one's really watching this crap. So, all right, but jumping right into this a little bit, just want to welcome one of our newest writer to the Blindside football team, Mark Hava, better known as Megatron FF on Twitter. Just everybody go out and congratulate him and go follow him. One of our newest Blindside writers, going to get some new articles over to us soon. So make sure you check out his work. And training camps, opening this week. This is going to be great. Well, next week, I should say. This is going to be good. Finally, we get some action. We are a month away from drafts, guys. This is good stuff. So this is the time that you really want to start preparing for the draft, listening to the podcast, getting your own cheat sheets ready. Just got a lot of work to do now between now and your draft, probably the middle to end of August, and football coming soon. Probably about 45 days now until football starts, so it's just around the corner.
I'm thinking it's about time for us to maybe look towards doing another rankings. Maybe something we can update for everybody as they're getting prepared here for the year.
Well, some of us have been updating their rankings as we go. Matt, you're a little behind the times.
Oh, all right.
That vacation is still a little foggy.
Yeah, I didn't know you did that. Good work out of you.
So, all right. So injuries. It seems to be just a running thing in the off season because there really isn't a whole lot to talk about, but. It might even be quicker just to go over who's not injured, I feel, at this point, because I feel every week half of our podcast is just injury after injury. But Rob Gronkowski officially placed on the training camp PUP list. Just so you know, the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, a lot different from the regular season PUP list. When you're on the regular season PUP list, that means you're going to miss the first 6 games of the year. So don't confuse this training camp PUP list with that. They can activate him at any time, but still not a good sign to see that... they're already seeing about sitting him out of training camp a little bit.
Well, there was something I think that was kind of expected too. And, last year I think Adrian Peterson had a pretty good year sitting out the preseason.
Yeah, it can definitely happen, and Gronk could be the exception rather than the norm. Right now you can see his ADP's kind of been falling as the news about his injuries keeps coming about. Currently going off the board in the middle of the 4th round at the 7th pick in the 4th round. Matt, I think you took him in one of our mocks,
right about there,
right around there. So you think that's pretty about where you should be going.
That's where I took him, and I can understand why. Like you said, the injury talk. This time of year, there's not a whole lot of other things we can talk about. Did he drop 2 balls at practice, or it's nothing really exciting. So injuries is what's talked about, and that's what you hear about. So you see Rob Gronkowski on the draft list, and it scares you a little bit, but. It's still a little early, and, as you said, he can be activated at any time. We'll look forward to that happening, and I think you'll see him climb up those boards a little bit.
Yeah, I got to tell you, if I can get Gronkowski in the middle of the 4th round, I'm getting him. Yeah. I love taking gambles on players, and we already know that when healthy, he's the number 1 tight end in the league.
Right.
That's a given. But I think he's going to, when healthy, he's going to be even better this year because of the lack of receivers that New England's going to have.
Yeah, Brady's going to have to lean on him.
He is going to have a ton of targets, way more than normal this year. I think he's going to be a huge part of that offense when healthy, and that's kind of what you have to balance with Gronkowski is, how many games is he going to miss for you this year? In the 4th round, are you okay with taking him and knowing that you're only going to get 10 games out of him, and then taking somebody later as a 5 to 6 week fill-in guy? Are you okay with that in the 4th round? Or are you going to take it a little bit safer, maybe wait on tight end, that type of thing? But, I love taking him in the middle of the 4th round. I like to gamble. I think he's proven year after year, 3 consecutive years with double-digit touchdowns. He's proven that he can get it done when healthy. And 10 games of Gronk is better than a lot of other tight ends out there, period. I could see him even playing in only 10 games being a top 5 tight end this year.
And not to mention it's 10 games being thrown to by a guy named Tom Brady, who says that he can still win another Super Bowl, and he thinks he can play into his 40s. He's going to be 36 at the start of this year. You think he's got another chance at a Super Bowl?
I mean, we live in New England. We watch them every week, but I honestly don't think he can. I really don't. I think he's starting to tail off in his career. It's the twilight of his career. He's losing receivers. Their defense is porous at best. I'm not seeing it. How about you?
Yeah, I think he can. He's still, at the top of the league as far as quarterbacks. There's really not many that I'd rather have for, the last minute drive in the NFL. Whether he's 36 today or 32, back in his prime when he was winning. Well, further than that, actually. Now,
yep, it
has been a while.
It's been 8 years, I think, since the last championship. So he was closer to 28.
It's been a while, but I still think he can do it. The NFL is a tough league, so if it doesn't happen, he's won a few. I think his legacy is pretty well stamped, but I think he's got a chance. And Belichick wins, and so does Brady. So I can see, this year is going to be tough. They could do some filling in, and he's still got it. I think he's going to see some more years.
They're lucky in the sense that the AFC East is just so bad that it's not that difficult to win every year. I mean, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Bills. There's no real competition there. There's nobody you're really afraid of. So I think they're continuously going to be in the postseason. But I just don't see them getting over that hurdle and beating those elite teams, especially not in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But Brady also kind of finally talked about Hernandez a little bit. He kind of tiptoed around it, didn't really mention Hernandez by name, but just kind of said that he's focusing on the future and that his job is to play QB and see what can be accomplished as a team. This is just blah blah blah. Who cares? This is just typical Brady and the Patriots way, just skipping over Hernandez, not really talking about him, just talking about what's going on now. But realistically, this affects him. This really does affect him.
Yeah, on the field, on a personal level, I think it's, when somebody does that, I think it's pretty easy to say, well, forget that guy, as far as on a personal level. But on the field, absolutely. Like you mentioned earlier, Gronkowski, you think he's going to be better in that situation because of who they've lost. There's another one, Hernandez. And Brady was quoted saying, he's moved on. But I think it's going to be tough to do on the field when you don't have Hernandez running around making it a little bit easier, your job a little easier as a quarterback with the talent he had.
He's basically just doing the PC thing, the right thing to say and trying to move on from it and not, obviously Bill Belichick doesn't like the media, so he doesn't want to bring any attention to obviously any media there.
Right.
But going in the middle of the 5th round, again, I think you took him in the blindside mock in the middle of the 5th round.
Right.
Going after quarterbacks like Rodgers, Breeze, and Newton, I think is correct. He's going after Peyton Manning, which I thought was interesting too. Would you take any of? Well, obviously you're going to take Rodgers and Breeze and probably Newton over Brady. Would you take Manning over him?
With the news Miller coming up here that he may be suspended, surprisingly, I think that actually kind of helps Manning. That it's going to hurt their defense.
They have to throw more.
In a fantasy aspect, I think they're going to have to score a little bit more now. They're losing one of the top players in the league. Let's face it, Von Miller is a star on the defensive side, so that defense isn't going to be what it could have been for that time he's suspended. Again, we don't know how long, but I think Manning has moved up for me a little bit from where he was when he was drafted, because I did take Brady over Manning. I actually took him over Newton as well.
I got Newton ahead of Brady, and the Manning Brady. It's really close.
Yeah.
Both have concerns. Brady's concern for me is his wide receivers. Manning is his age and his just I'm worried about that neck. I think a couple good hits and Manning could be missing a couple games. If I had to pick one, I guess I'm taking Brady over Manning, just because I think Brady has proven in the past that even with no-name receivers, he can get it done. Like you said, he won Super Bowls with people like Deion Branch and Rashae Caldwell, so he's definitely proven that he can do it with no-name guys. But moving on to other quarterbacks here, RG3 finally cleared to practice. That's got to push his ADP up, right? It's got to be pushing him up in drafts now that people know that he's going to be healthy and be around for week 1, right?
Sure, for the general public, I kind of figured that. So for me, he's not really moving up. I kind of had him, and it's not that he's definite for week 1. They're not saying that yet.
You're right, and they did say that they're going to probably hold him out of the preseason
Right,
games. Sources
right.
close to Shanahan said they're going to hold him out of the preseason games.
It's certainly good news, though. I could see him moving up on most, in ADP for sure. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, it looks like he's going right now, the first pick in the 7th round. Seems probably fair for what we know so far about him. I can tell you that that's about where I'm targeting this year is 6th, 7th round, end of the 6th round, beginning of the 7th.
Yep.
And if he falls to the 8th, I am thrilled. But we've all discussed about my strategy this year of trying to get 2 of the rushing quarterbacks in those 6th and 7th rounds, and kind of playing the hot hand at quarterback there and streaming the quarterbacks between the two.
You could almost play the first. Say you're not confident in RG3 to start the season, you could almost play the waiver wire for starting quarterbacks just to fill in those few weeks until you're feeling good about RG3.
Quarterback is really, really deep,
So
and that's another good point. I mean, it's kind of going back to the Gronk issue. 7th round, yeah, but realistically, how many games do you think he's going to miss? And then I guess the only other concern is, do you think he's going to be the same running quarterback he was last year, or do you think they're going to be more conservative with him, make him throw out of the pocket more, hand the ball off to Morris more? So a couple concerns, but I think the first half of last year he was the number 1 fantasy quarterback through like 7 or 8 weeks, so he's definitely proven that he can do it. So 7th round is definitely some value for him, despite the deep quarterback, the quarterback class. But moving on, another guy that just became a full participant, Trent Richardson, full participant last week in the injured/rookie camp that the Browns held. Going at the end of the first round, basically now at the 9th pick overall. After guys like C.J. Spiller, LaShawn McCoy, but before guys like Alfred Morris and Steven Jackson, Matt Forte and C.J. 2K. About right for him. I know I personally had him probably a little bit higher than this even before this news.
Right.
Where are you drafting Trent Richardson?
I think that's about right. I could see taking him ahead of Spiller.
Really?
Yeah. But if I was faced with a pick, I'm pretty sure I would go Spiller. But I could see that happening. Trent's definitely an exciting player, as Spiller is. But both those guys have some concerns, both injury concerns, and really haven't completely proven it yet. Although Trent did have a great year as well as Spiller last year. I like there after Spiller, after McCoy, but before Morris, Jackson, Forte, and CJ 2K. The note you made. That's right about where he'd be. Like I said, maybe Spiller, but yeah, I think I'd take Spiller.
Yeah, no, actually, I think you're right with what you said. I would actually take Richardson over Spiller.
Yeah.
I know I said really because I didn't think you would be the type of guy that would take Richardson over Spiller because I know you like the big play guys, the flashy guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would take Richardson over Spiller. Spiller hasn't proven yet that he can handle a full workload, whereas Richardson has. And Richardson's going to be their offense. Not to mention, I think I saw somewhere last year that Spiller only had, I think it was 1 carry inside the 5-yard line last year. So it kind of shows that he is not, a goal line back by any means. He scores a lot of his touchdowns from pretty far out on pretty big runs and receptions. Not the goal line guy that, a guy like Trent Richardson is. And when I'm taking a guy in the first round, especially a running back, I want a guy that's going to consistently get me, double-digit touchdowns, not high yardage and hope for those touchdowns from long ways out.
Yep.
So I actually like Richardson a little bit better than the 9th pick. Probably 7th, 8th range. Not a whole lot better than 9th, but definitely a little bit better. Another guy that was cleared, another running back, MJD, finally cleared to return to training camp. I honestly think he's this year's Adrian Peterson, and not from a sense that he's going to come back from a knee injury and have 2,000 rushing yards and just tear up the league and be unstoppable. But I think right now people are underdrafting him because they're worried about an injury that doesn't really exist. I mean, obviously he had the injury last year, but he's over it now. And so a guy like this falling to the end of the 2nd round, middle to end of 2nd round, I think we all forget that for the longest time he was a perennial top 3, top 5 running back and top 3, top 5 overall fantasy pick. I think people are quick to forget that and think he has a chance to return to that top 5 glory again.
Yeah, I do absolutely. He's actually a guy with not quite as big a name as Adrian, so he's actually, I think, falling a little more. Like you said, Adrian, obviously a different story. He was coming in off a serious knee injury that I couldn't really imagine. Like you said, MJD is fairly healthy right now. So I think he could be right back up there. He's a guy where if it's round 2, say I had a late pick in the first round, I went wide receiver, I would be pumped to have MJD as my number 1 in the second round. So.
Yeah, I gotta say, thinking about this real quick, if you look at these last couple guys we've gone over, and let's just say hypothetically you have, I don't know, the 4th or 5th pick in the draft, there's the chance that, say, 4th, 5th pick overall, you go with a guy that I love in Jamal Charles. Second round pick, you're coming around with MJD, and then 3rd round pick, maybe you're coming up with a Demaryius Thomas, some sort of good stud receiver, and then finishing it up 4th round with a guy like Rob Gronkowski. And I think if you have so then basically the number 1 tight end and Gronkowski, that's a really strong team right off the bat.
That's a dream scenario right there.
It is. And then, even to our point, 5th round, maybe you go with Brady, or maybe you wait a couple more rounds, and 7th round you go with RG3. And I think that's a real strong team.
Yeah.
Real solid starting team. So moving on, another guy cleared to finally be a full participant, a guy that I really loved last year and kind of proved it, kind of didn't, but Pierre Garçon, going to be a full participant in training camp, just got cleared today. So a couple of stats I just wanted to throw out there about Pierre Garçon, because I don't think, if you haven't read my article, go out there and read it, because it's really going to open your eyes to him. But a couple of quick stats that I don't think people realize. He was actually targeted more in the backfield last year than Randall Cobb was, and that's despite missing several games. So when people think of Randall Cobb and they're thinking of a Percy Harvin type guy that's in the backfield getting screen passes, realistically, Pierre Garçon was targeted on a higher percentage of plays. He was in the backfield a higher percentage of plays. And even beyond that, Garçon's yards after catch per reception was almost 2 full yards higher than Randall Cobb's. So not only was he catching the ball in the backfield, but he was running with it more and getting out into space further. So, I think a lot of people think of him as that big guy, the red zone guy, and I don't think they realize that that's not really how the Redskins utilized him last year.
I think he's sample size, too, is something you got to look at. Garçon obviously wasn't on the field like Cobb and Harvin were, so he's a guy that just never has really proven it completely. He's shown flashes. And for me, I know you're on board. I just got to see it, and you've opened my eyes to it for sure, but I got to see it. It's not a guy I'm super excited about, but I know you are, and hopefully you're going to prove me wrong.
Oh, I love him so much. But, all right, moving on, we're going to talk about probably some of the rumors and things around the NFL right now. Some of the things that are just talk, nothing real concrete yet. But there's rumors out there that Percy Harvin's expected to receive some carries in the backfield. I guess the plan is for him to get 2 to 3 carries a game. And they specified mostly in the red zone, which I thought was interesting. So it sounds like maybe some gadget plays that they have planned for him. Basically, the most rush attempts he's had in his career was back in 2011 with 52. And other than that, he really hasn't had a lot of rush attempts. Last year was his second most rush attempts in a year with only 22. And to give you an idea, wide receivers don't really run the ball out of the backfield a lot. Again, going back to Randall Cobb, everybody sees him as a Harvin type guy. And even Randall Cobb only had 10 carries last year. So, Matt, what do you... Percy Harvin, over or under 35 rushing attempts this year?
I could see an over. The thing I like about the offense they're going to have is obviously Russell Wilson's capability to move as well. So I can see what they're talking about in a red zone type situation where let's bring in 3-4 wide receivers, spread the defense out, let's get in a shotgun and maybe run a little bit of an read option type thing going on in the red zone. And Percy and Russell Wilson would be quite an explosive duo to do that with. So I could see that happening. I could definitely see some touchdown running opportunities. And I think over 35.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I would love to see a package of Russell Wilson, Percy Harvin, and Marshawn Lynch all in the backfield. Wilson maybe in a shotgun set with each of those guys to, one side. I think that could be really, really interesting to see a read option with those guys. So do you think this takes away from Marshawn Lynch's, what he's going to do this year a little bit?
No, I don't. I think it's going to help Marshawn in the fact that maybe he's not going to have to bang so much. He's a guy that just runs so hard. It's going to take a toll on him sooner or later. So if it saves a few of those, great. I think he's still clearly the workhorse of that offense. So I don't really see it hurting. Maybe you lose a touchdown here and there, and touchdowns are valuable, so it could. But I don't really see it changing anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean,
it's going to help the offense move too, as well.
Yeah, it'll keep him fresh, and I think, I mean, anytime you're talking about a guy that's only going to get 30 to 35, carries a year, that's not going to eat into anybody's work by any means.
Right.
If his name
probably
wasn't
the third stringer's work, that's about it.
Yeah, if his name wasn't Percy Harvin, it was Joe Smith, and he was a no-name guy that was going to get 30 to 35 carries, we wouldn't even be talking about him right now.
Right.
So Daryl Richardson, listed on the Rams depth chart as the starter, with Zach Stacy and Isaiah Peed both listed as key contributors, which I honestly don't even know what that means.
That's it's a nice way. It's like today's society, everything's got to be nice.
PC.
It's like, yeah, it's like, I guess it's like saying, hey guys, don't worry, you're not the backups, you're just a key contributor.
Yeah,
it's interesting. We'll see what happens. What it's telling me is there's a stable there. So.
Yeah, almost like everybody gets an award in middle school.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, well, you're the starter on first downs, and you're the starter on second downs, and you'll be the starter on blocking downs,
right,
and
exactly,
and everybody's happy.
Very nice.
Yeah, but I think it kind of goes back though to what we've been saying about Richardson being the starter. I mean, I think we've been calling that all along.
Yep.
I think it's still going to be the case. I think a lot of people get very hyped up about rookie running backs and what they might do, and for some reason quickly take Zach Stacy and compare him to Alfred Morris last year because they were both late round running back picks for teams that needed running backs. But Alfred Morris was, again, he's an exception to the rule. He's not the rule. People need to stop looking at what Alfred Morris did last year and thinking that that's going to happen normally out of 6th round running backs.
Plus, there's only one crazy Mike Shanahan, so.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Jeff Fisher, I'm sure, will try to do his best this year to steal that away. We'll call him, I don't know, you got Shahanigans, what are we going to call it? Fishigans?
Yeah, sure.
God. So moving on, talking about some more kind of shenanigans here. Running back shenanigans. Monty Ball set to open as the 3rd down back. Ronnie Hillman is officially going to be the starter for the start of training camp, and they seem to really emphasize the start of training camp and not, the start of the year. But right now we're seeing Hillman go way after Ball in leagues. Ball's actually been creeping up big time since Willis McGahee's been cut, moving all the way up to the start of the 4th round, at the 4th pick in the 4th round. Hillman way there at the end of the 11th round. I got to tell you, I like Ball on a dynasty point, but I don't see it in redrafts. I don't see high 4th round. And then I think the way his hype, the hype train's going on him, if they announce he's the starter, he could end up a mid-second round pick. And I think that's just crazy right now.
Yeah, we don't want to beat a dead horse either. We talked about the fact that, Hillman and Ball, what a big difference in the ADP there. It's quite a value pick when you're talking Hillman in the 11th versus Ball in the 4th.
For a guy that's a potential starter, even for part of the year,
it's so good. Early right now. It's one of these things where we have the problem of, training camp's not starting yet, but I'm going to have to just see this play out. I think I definitely wouldn't touch Ball in the 4th round, especially we were talking earlier, you can get guys like Gronkowski and Brady and Manning and Newton probably. I'm not touching Ball there. I'll wait and get something else.
Yeah, that's a good point that you can go out and get Tom Brady, after Monty Ball. That Monty Ball's going ahead of Tom.
After Monty Ball.
That's when you put that in perspective, guys. That is pretty crazy. But let's do a quick little comparison here. What if you had to draft and you were looking for a running back in the 11th round, or actually even these guys are going before Hillman right now? Zach Stacy, Pierre Thomas, Isaiah Peed, Danny Woodhead, Vic Ballard, and Ronnie Hillman. Who's your guy?
Probably Vic Ballard.
Really? You're going with Ballard? You have no love for Ahmad Bradshaw?
I'm just, that foot. I mean, that it's just, I don't know. None of those guys have a clear-cut path. It's going to be, we'll see what happens as training camp goes on. We're going to know better. If it wasn't Ballard, I mean, I got them all right on the same. It's a great list of guys there. I think Pierre Thomas is one I can easily take out. Peed.
Really, my guy would have been Pierre Thomas.
Yeah, it's not me. I think this is a year that I've talked about before. I think that running back situation is going to be a little different in New Orleans. I think they're going to go away from Pierre this year. Woodhead's not on that level with me, but I like Ballard. I like Stacy, although I like Richardson. I think he's going to be a surprise this year. So, yeah, I think Ballard. Just the injury, the guy ahead of him or supposedly ahead of him is more likely to get hurt than anybody. So
he probably is more likely to be injured. But I got to say, out of those guys, if I'm not taking Pierre Thomas, then it's got to be Hillman, I think. I mean, Hillman, I think,
yeah,
is
that's true. Hillman's up there, too.
Better than, I think, right up there over all those guys. I'm definitely taking Hillman over Stacy and Pede. It's just a mess out there in St. Louis.
Yep.
Ballard, I mean, to your point, the thing, you mentioned about Bradshaw missing games, but when you actually go back and look at it, did you know that he's actually played in more games in the last 3 years than Darren McFadden? And scored more touchdowns in the last 3 years than Darren McFadden. So
yeah,
I think
I would say the injury. I mean, the games. Yeah, I didn't know touchdowns. No,
I think people are quick to just write off Ahmad Bradshaw and put him up as injury prone. But when you go back and look at it, he actually played through that injury a lot, that foot injury a lot, and then had surgeries in the off season, so it didn't really affect him too much. And when he did play, he was effective.
Yeah.
And obviously they went out and got him because they were worried about Vic Ballard's blocking for Andrew Luck. Mm-hmm. But like you said, I mean, if an injury happens, he's the guy. He's going to be the guy that jumps right back in there and take over as a starting guy. And he proved last year that he can handle it.
Right.
Moving on here, though, according to ESPN New York, the Giants are going to use the hot hand approach this year with David Wilson and Andre Brown. And I think this goes back to kind of what we've been saying about the Monty Ball and Ronnie Hillman, thing. Not to beat a dead horse here, but I think Brown and Wilson are a lot closer together than people realize.
Yeah, you wrote a great article about this. We've actually talked about it on the podcast, too.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote my article about this way back on March 1st, so forever ago. So, I mean, it kind of shows you that nothing's really changed for me. But when you go back and look at their numbers, when weeks 1 through 9, when they played together, both were available to be on the field at the same time. Andre Brown had 60 carries to David Wilson's 18 and crushed him in just every stat you can think of. I mean, Brown had 321 rushing yards to Wilson's 88, had 7 rushing touchdowns to Wilson's 1. Even in the reception department, I mean, in a place that you wouldn't think that Andre Brown would excel in, he had 12 receptions to David Wilson's 1. I mean, I know he was in Grandpa Coughlin's doghouse there in the beginning because of the fumbles, but it just goes to show you that when they were both available to play, Andre Brown was the guy that got most of the work, and I don't understand their ADPs.
We can go hit rewind and go right back to what we talked about earlier with Monty Ball. We're talking about a 4th round guy. I'm talking about a 3rd round guy now. You can still get guys like Gronkowski, Newton. I can't see taking him in the 3rd round.
Yeah, he's not.
When guys like him are there, and he's not even close to proven. Yeah. In New York, I think people are crazy, and I think we've been saying that. So
drafts are all about value. Everybody talks about value based drafting,
right?
And I think when you look at value based drafting, these are the guys you should be targeting: Ronnie Hillman, Andre Brown, these later round guys that are going to be contributors and be part of a running back by committee.
Yep.
They're going to be on the lesser half of it, but when you compare ADPs, it's so much more of value, and they're going to be used so much more than you think.
And a lot of people talk about. I got a strategy going into the draft. I understand you got an idea, but for me, I'm always value-based. I'm not going to, because I told myself I'm going to have a running back by round 3, I'm not going to panic and take a guy like David Wilson.
Yeah,
I'm all about value at a position, as long as it's not like, taking a bench guy or a starter later rounds. I'm all about value. Who's the best available? We'll worry about it next round. Just keep taking the best available guy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, say you take Jimmy Graham in the 2nd round, and something crazy happens where Gronk is falling in 5th or even the 6th round. Gronk is still there. Even with Jimmy Graham, if it's the 6th round, you got to take Gronk. I mean, if anything, you hope he comes back from injury, and then you trade one of them.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's another thing. I'd look to see what's out there.
Everybody has, at some point, everybody has
value down the road. Yep.
At some point, everybody has value. It doesn't matter how far they're fallen. They have value somewhere in the draft. So just, really watch out for that. Watch for the guys that are falling. Don't get stuck like some people do on the wrong side of running back runs or wide receiver runs. Don't be a sheep and follow the herd. Do your own thing. If you got a guy that you really like, you need to grab him, not just keep following whatever trend is happening in your league. Right. But you do need to pay attention to what's happening in the draft. So another running back that I think I like a lot more this year than a lot of people, Ryan Matthews. The Chargers head coach, Mike McCoy, kind of said he had a message for Matthews. It's to have a great year, and be the guy this year. And I think what people don't realize with Ryan Matthews is he was actually better last year than you think. And I know there's a lot of the, he had more broken collarbones last year than touchdowns and all that kind of stuff. But I actually did a player profile with my buddy Todd McDaniel. You better know him as the FF Counselor on Twitter. But we kind of talked about Matthews a little bit. I don't think people realize that he's only a year removed from a 1,500 total yard season. This time last year we were talking about Ryan Matthews as a second and third round pick, and he was slowly kind of moving up towards that beginning half of the second round. I don't think people realize exactly what you're getting here with Matthews, but even in the a little bit of time that he had with the injuries last year, he finished 8th in the NFL in yards after contact per rush attempt. So that's telling you that as injury prone as he is, and as worried as he is to take hits and all that other crap that you hear from people, he was taking hits and still getting yards after it. I mean, 8th in the league is nothing to sneeze at. That is, he's showing you that he can take the hard hit up the middle and keep plugging away. And even beyond that, he had more, in the 12 games he played last year, he had more missed tackles than Ray Rice and Jamal Charles. So that's showing you that he's more elusive than Ray Rice and Jamal Charles, which is amazing to me. What do you take of all that, Matt?
I've talked about in the past my eye test. It's kind of like what I think as far as watching a guy, just watching him play football on the field. Not looking at all the stats and just looking at him play. He looks like he's good. He really does. They don't really feature him enough. I think a lot of it's just the, being scared to hurt the guy. He's always seemed to getting nicked up. If he can put it together, I still have faith in him. Like I said, when I watch him, I really see a talented guy. He can do it all, out of the backfield, pretty much wherever you want to give him the football. But he's just got to put it together. He is a guy that is falling. 5th round, I think, is about right. If I'm in a situation where I need a running back, he's available. See what else is on the board, but he's a guy that I could go with in the 5th round. It's tough because he's just always hurt, and it's tough to rely on him. It really is.
See, I mean, I love everything about him in the 5th round. If you go, my strategy this year is to probably go running back, wide receiver, running back, and then 2 quarterbacks, the 6th and 7th rounds, to kind of get my RG3s and Wilsons and all that. So if you're following that strategy, he's going to be your running back 3/flex guy. And I think he is a strong running back 3/flex guy. I mean, So last year he had 184 carries in 12 games. So, I mean, that amounts to, let's see here, 184 divided by 12, 15 carries a game. That's nothing to sneeze at. If he can finish out a full season, it's a 240 carry season. You throw in 30 to 40 receptions, and now you're talking a guy that's getting 270 touches. Who's proven that he can do stuff with them. More elusive than Jamal Charles. I can't say that enough. That is amazing when you think about that. Different type of player, obviously. He's obviously closer to maybe a Ray Rice style guy. But in middle of the 5th round, if you can get him as your running back 3, your flex guy, I think that's great value. I'm very happy with him there. I'm not saying go out and try to get him in the 4th round, because I think that might be a bit of a reach. But end of the 4th round and anything after that, I'd be grabbing him, especially as my running back 3. So Nick Foles, he's in a lead, I guess, right now over Michael Vick for the starting quarterback job for the Eagles. Supposedly has outplayed him in OTAs and in minicamp, and I think he kind of maybe fits the Chip Kelly offense a little bit more, because I think I was reading that last year, obviously again small sample size, but Foles was getting the ball out half a second quicker than Michael Vick was. So it's showing that he's kind of taking that drop back and hitting his receiver, and I think that kind of fits the Chip Kelly offense because he's real quick, real hurry up. Matt, you watch a lot more college football than I do. What do you find about the Chip Kelly offense? Which one fits better?
Yeah, he's. I wish I had the stats with me, but plays per game.
You'll get it out eventually.
Yeah, plays per game. You should see the numbers compared to the number 1 team in the NFL. Now you got to think too. College is a shorter game. It's amazing how quickly he moves the ball. He's all about go. So Vic, I think, fits the mold. If he can get that through his head, you got to hold on. I mean, you can't hold on to the football. I think he's better fit for his offense. I still think Vic's going to get the job. But this is surprising news to me. Nick Foles is in the lead. we'll see what happens. It could be something where they're trying to get a little motivation from Mike, although he should have plenty of that. Obviously, this has been a competition since the start. So I'm still pulling for Vic. Jesus, I wrote an article about him. But I think if either one of them play, it's going to be an exciting team to watch. I would just really like to see Vic make the winning quarterback bid.
Yeah, I think the offense is definitely going to be very interesting this year, and I think it's going to be one of those offenses that everybody's going to kind of want to watch. Speaking of the Eagles' offense, I thought this was kind of interesting. Jerry Maclin says he believed more involved in the team's offense in 2013. He says the previous offense was tailored around Deshaun Jackson. Thought it was interesting for him to come out and say that, considering Deshaun's still with the team. Kind of goes back to our whole PC thing. Not really the PC thing to say, but came out and he was quoted as saying, "There's two ways to run a West Coast offense. You can run it where the flanker position, you put him in the slot, you put him in motion, or you can tailor around a single receiver who's always by himself. When Marty was here, we tailored it around the flanker position. That's just how it was." So I guess my question to you is, Maclin or D-Jax, who do you want this year? Who do you got? Maclin going about a round and a half later than Deshaun.
Because I can get Maclin around 9 right now, I'm going to say Maclin.
Really? See, I'm all in on Deshaun. I think he has that chance, from what I'm hearing, with the Chip Kelly offense to be that Randall Cobb type player, that Percy Harvin type player. Mm-hmm. I think he has the skill set to do it, and I think he has the speed to do it, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what he does this year. I think Macklin's going to be that bigger play guy that's going to maybe have more touchdowns, but I think at the end of the season, D-Jax is going to have more receptions and more yards, and just a completely different receiver from what he was early in his career, where he was just the deep bomb guy.
People forget Maclin, when he was in Missouri, he was one of the most explosive punt returners in college football. He's a guy that is very explosive. I think they're kind of interchangeable in that regard. Jackson is just kind of on a different level, so that's why you don't quite see it with Maclin, because he's running next to a guy like Jackson, but he is a very explosive guy. I think they're both going to do well, and because he's a couple rounds further from me, I'm going to take Maclin, just because it's a big question. You don't really know what Chip Kelly's going to be doing in Philly, so I like the value of round 9 versus 7, although they're close, and I think either one of them could have a great year.
Both are lottery tickets, I think. When you're starting to get down that late, I just like the upside of Jackson a lot more than Maclin. But speaking of guys with upside, Michael Crabtree, Jim Harbaugh is kind of saying that he's looking great in his recovery. Was quoted as saying, "Wouldn't categorize it as ahead of schedule because he's just starting to move on it, but he's healing and it looks good." He's apparently preparing for a return at the end of the season. Are you drafting him at all? I think we kind of went over this, but does this change anything for you? Are you drafting him? Are you targeting him at the end of the year? Michael Crabtree, what do you do?
No, I'm not drafting him. Certainly not, unless maybe your league has a position you can put somebody, on the IR. But I'll look at him late in the year. If I'm in a team, if my team's shaped out where maybe my wide receiver position is struggling and I need a spark, he's a guy I'd certainly look to. He has a good rapport with Kaepernick, but it's a long way. I'm not expecting him back until sometime in November. So for me, I'm not drafting him. I'm not going to waste a spot just to sit around and wait like that.
He is a guy with high upside, but I think, like we went over this a few weeks ago, I don't think he's back anywhere near before week 10.
Right.
I think if he is a guy that's on your roster, when you do have to clear room, because you got guys on bye weeks and you need a bye week filling guy, I think he's the first guy you're cutting. So there's really no point in holding him for all those weeks with a wasted roster spot. But at the end of the year, he could provide some punch, and I would maybe go out and pick him up 2 to 3 weeks before he's going to be back. If he's going to be back, week 10 or 11, I go out and get him week 8 or 9 and stash him away and hope something happens for the playoffs. So talking more about the San Francisco team here, Frank Gore finally accepts a lesser role. It's being reported. He understands he means more to them long term and needs to pace himself throughout the year. So right now, it's sounding like it's going to be more LaMichael James and more Kendall Hunter this year. Right now, going at the very end of the second round is his ADP, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, which I thought was kind of interesting because I thought in most leagues he was pretty consistently going in the middle to end of the third round, but they had him at the end of the second. So he's going ahead of guys like DeMarco Murray, Lamar Miller, Darren McFadden, David Wilson, who we just talked about, Darren Sproles, and all the rookie running backs. You going to take any of those guys over him?
Probably not. Probably not. Maybe I look at McFadden and DeMarco Murray. That's about it.
See, I would probably go DeMarco Murray over him because I think Murray has shown his explosiveness when he's healthy. And again, this is a whole lot of when they're healthies. But he's a guy that has shown that explosiveness. McFadden, I've actually been a guy that's loved McFadden over the years, but after sitting down, just looking at the numbers and seeing how much he's injured and how little he actually plays, I'm going to kind of stay away from him, I think, this year.
It's hard to love him long term. He's not a guy you can get married to. Over time, you're just going to get sick of him. He leaves the toilet seat up all the time. I don't know
why, but when you said
there's always hair on the sink. It's just fucking.
I was going to say, when you said that, all that went through my head there was, me love you long time.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was running through my head, but Frank Gore, though, the last 2 years had almost identical seasons. 1,211 yards one year, 1,214 yards the other. 8 rushing touchdowns in both of them, and those seasons were his best seasons since 2006. So
great. Pencil it in.
Pencil him in for 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. If you're okay with that in your second round pick, then there you go. If you want to take a more high upside guy, then you know his ceiling and stay away. Speaking of aging running backs, though, I found this really, really interesting. Apparently, the Packers at the end of last season, had the chance to acquire Steven Jackson for a 7th round pick, and the GM Ted Thompson didn't want to take on Jackson's salary, and I just think that is fucking crazy. If you look at Steven Jackson, his salary, mind you, it was 1 year remaining on his deal for $4 million.
Yeah,
that is not crazy for a team that is still, obviously the Packers, they're a Super Bowl contending team every year. And I'm not taking anything away from Jonathan Franklin or Eddie Lacy or any of those guys. But to have
this
a veteran...
was last year, too, we're talking.
Well, it just said last year. I didn't know if it meant the end of the previous season coming up or whatever it was. Anyway,
it was before draft.
Before the draft.
Lacy and Franklin weren't talked about yet. Obviously they were talked about. They weren't there, so... Yeah,
I'm not taking anything away from those guys, and maybe the Packers said these are the guys they want for the future. But, my God, a 7th round pick and $4 million?
I think
you're a Super Bowl contending team. He is elite. He's getting old, but he still knows how to block. He still knows how to run, how to hit the holes, everything at the very least.
Yeah, out of the backfield. I think if Aaron Rodgers would go into a room, mold a running back, and come out, you'd see Steven Jackson walk out with him. He was everything they needed. I was saying that all along. I think it would have been the perfect situation for Steven Jackson, too. Nice way to twilight his career, but Ted Thompson obviously didn't sell enough fake stocks to all of his fans. Idiot. They should go buy more fake stocks. Maybe next time they can get a guy like Steven Jackson.
That's just crazy. To give you an idea of some guys in the league making more than Steven Jackson, we just talked about him. Frank Gore, $6.45 million. D'Angelo Williams, $5 million. Those are guys that are making more money than Steven Jackson. So $4 million for Steven Jackson is not crazy.
Steal.
It's just... You're on a championship contending team. You needed a running back. That's what you needed. He's your guy. I don't get it. So talking about a few tight ends here, Brent Selleck reportedly will be the blocking tight end in the new Chip Kelly offense for the Eagles, with rookie Zach Ertz and James Casey being the primary receiving tight ends. Does this mean anything to you, or you're not drafting any of them, so it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. It's too bad for Selleck. He was a guy that showed some good seasons. He's obviously getting a little older now, but yeah, I'm neither one of them for now.
Yeah, so
we'll see what happens. Ertz is an intriguing prospect. In case he had some flashes in Houston, so we'll see. But
yeah, Selleck looked good back in the days with Michael Vick. Back when Michael Vick was actually looking good himself. But those days have definitely passed, and they're moving on with Zach Ertz. And I think Zach Ertz in Dynasty will be good. He may end up being a low end tight end 1 in Dynasty. but I think for redraft purposes, you're looking at him as a low-end tight end 2 with upside. I wouldn't expect much out of him this year. Even in Dynasty, I think he's, like I said, maybe a low-end tight end 1 to maybe high-end tight end 2. We'll know more, obviously, as preseason takes shape and we see how he's being utilized. And speaking of another guy and how he's being utilized, another tight end, rumors are that Jake Ballard is not a lock to make the Patriots roster, and I don't understand that at all. How can he not be a lock to make the Patriots roster? I mean, number 1, Gronk is hurt. Number 2, Hernandez is locked up. Number 3, this is a guy that you took off of waivers knowing that he had a torn ACL, and you held on to him for a full season so that you'd have him for this moment. And now he's not a lock to make the team?
Well, I don't know, and this is all speculation, but the last time I saw him, he had a gut on him like an offensive lineman. So there's a good chance that with that year of rehabilitation, maybe he's not in quite the shape they were hoping he'd be in.
So you think you don't think this is any type
100% speculation. I haven't heard anything about that, but I've seen him on the football field. He's not a guy that's a physical specimen in any peak form. So
you don't think this is just a kick in the butt, the way some coaches say, every position's up for grabs in training camp?
I've never been a big fan of Jake Ballard. I know he did some nice things in New York, but I think it was more a case of he's all they had. So I would have to I need more information on it, but like I said, it's not a big, huge surprise to me. Although, like you said, there's nobody else there, so it's like by just attrition, you'd think he'd be a guy that's making the roster, so they can have a tight end.
Yeah, and for all those guys that keep thinking that Jake Ballard is going to be the replacement for Aaron Hernandez, he's not. He is a totally different player than Aaron Hernandez.
He's a slow, plodding, good blocking.
He is more the backup for Gronk than anything. He is Gronk-esque, but not as big. So if you think he's getting in there in 2 tight end sets, he's not, guys. He really isn't. They're going to throw like a Julian Edelman type guy in there for that Hernandez type role. Maybe he's in on 2 tight end sets when he's the blocking tight end. But other than that, he's don't expect any sort of Hernandez like work out of Jake Ballard. Other Patriots receivers that we're talking about here, Donald Jones gets cut by the Patriots, which I thought was interesting because they seemed to sign him to a deal where they thought he would be the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 in their offense. But I guess he was expendable in part because of a strong offseason by Kenbrell Tompkins, who appears to be an undrafted free agent. I haven't really read too much on him, but
no, don't even know the name, I'll be honest.
It's going to be interesting to see what the Patriots put out there this year for starting wide receivers. They got Kenbrell Tompkins, they got Josh Boyce, they got Aaron Dobson, Julian Edelman, who's a little banged up and is going to start the training camp on the PUP list. And then finally, Danny Amendola, who was no picture of health himself.
Right.
So
maybe now, but
right now sitting on his couch at home. As soon as he reaches over to pick up that bag of chips, though, he might strain a groin or something. But it's going to be really interesting to see what the Patriots do this year at wide receiver. I'm honestly surprised they haven't brought in like an older veteran to come in and kind of help them out a little bit, just to give them some veteran leadership. I don't even know what else to say about this. It's going to be interesting to see who comes out of this as the starting wide receiver opposite of Amendola.
Yeah, well, I think whoever it is, Brady's going to make him look a lot better than he really is.
Oh yeah, definitely. Speaking of guys and looking better than they are, Santonio Holmes expected to begin the preseason on the PUP list. Season opener is kind of up in the air for him right now. I don't think people realize, but in his career, he's only had one 1,000-yard season.
Yeah, you know what it is that catch he had in the back of the end zone.
That's all everybody remembers, and that's what he got paid off of. After that,
exactly.
Super Bowl MVP and all that happy crap, he got his big contract, and
since then he's really been nothing but a big mouth, and
just
a guy
cashed
who
it
doesn't
in.
really produce on a consistent level ever.
Yeah, so if he's expected to miss any time, what does this do for you with Stephen Hill? I know Stephen Hill is a big kind of breakout guy for me this year that I think is going to well outperform his ADP, and obviously you can say that about any guy you're taking in the 14th, 15th round, but I think Stephen Hill is the guy that can maybe push into the top 30 wide receivers this year, which is probably 6th, 7th round category. What's your take on Stephen Hill?
Yeah, I love his size, very fast. He can go up and get footballs. He's raw. That's something obviously he's been working on, and there really isn't much else to step up and take over there. So he's a great guy that could do that. And I do like him this year. He's a guy, like you said, that could really outperform his ADP. He's a talented guy who is raw, but has all the ability in the world. So, again, it's a thing where there's not really anyone else there. Quarterback situation, really not much there either, but I like him. He's a guy that I'm going to be looking to as well. So make sure you draft him a little earlier in our drafts, because if you want him, I might be taking him before you.
Yeah. And another wide receiver that I think is going to probably outperform his ADP if all this comes out to be true. But Omar Kelly from South Florida Sun Centennial reporting that when a play breaks down in OTAs and minicamps here, Tannehill is immediately looking to Hartline and not Mike Wallace. Obviously, he has that chemistry with Hartline from last year.
Yeah,
that doesn't seem to be any real big surprises. Just thought that was interesting to note, though, that right now Hartline I think is going 13th, 14th round, just crazy late. And when that play breaks down, that's who he's looking for. So it could be a sneaky PPR guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, though, it is something that takes time. A quarterback building chemistry with one of his receivers, so this could sway over time. Wallace is definitely more of a talented player, and over time, I think you're going to see that from Tannehill realizing, hey, you know what, I should probably look to Wallace, but. For now, Hartline, he is a younger guy who had some big games last year. He's a comfortable guy with Tannehill, so yeah, absolutely. I think he's a good ADP, good value where his ADP is. Guy that's going to get a lot of catches, I think, and Wallace being on the other side is really going to help him open the field up a little bit. So
yes, on Hartline here a little bit. Just if he explodes those first couple weeks of the year, sell high on him.
Yeah,
Eventually, Wallace is, he is the more talented receiver there, and he's obviously going to build some chemistry with Tannehill. So, if Hartline does break loose, especially in dynasty leagues, sell high on Tannehill and dump him. It's eventually going to change. You can't. It's not preceding things to come here. He is just not. He does have skills. Don't get me wrong, but Wallace was brought in to be the guy and will be the guy one way or another. So moving on to some training camp tryouts here. I thought this one was really interesting. Another guy being brought back from the dead here. Laurent Robinson. I'm going to play around with that a little bit because I know it's Laurent. Nobody seems to really know. But he's going to go he visited the Patriots today, and tomorrow he's actually visiting the Detroit Lions. Previously met with the Jets. I don't know where he ends up, but if I'm in a dynasty league and he's sitting out on your waiver wire right now, I go pick him up, because if he lands on the Patriots or the Lions, those are two great opportunities for him. Obviously the Patriots because he could be the starting wide receiver, and the Lions strictly because, hell, last year they threw the ball 700 times. He's going to get some targets there.
Yeah.
You pick him up, and I think if he lands on the Jets, if the Jets end up with him, then I dump him. Maybe hold on to him to see what he does in training camp and preseason. But if he lands with either the Patriots or the Lions, this is a good lottery ticket to steal off your waiver wire in dynasty leagues right now.
Absolutely, that's a great call, especially I think with the Patriots. That would be exciting.
I think he'd be a great fit right there with all the injuries that they have. Little scary that he's been with 4 different teams in his 6 years in the NFL. But he did have his best year just 2 years ago with the Cowboys. 54 catches for 858 yards and 11 touchdowns. So he's shown that he could be kind of that red zone guy and get a lot of touchdowns. He's a great guy. I think he should get a chance again in the NFL. And kind of like I said earlier, I'm surprised the Patriots haven't brought in, a veteran like this. Another guy being brought back from the dead, though, in these tryouts, Peyton Hillis, a name that we haven't really said since he graced us with the cover of Madden. But he's going to go work out for the Buccaneers. I think he's a great fit as a fullback. I don't think he's ever going to return to the glory days of being that powerhouse running back again. What do you think? Any worry for Doug Martin owners?
Hell no, he's done.
I think Peyton Hillis is over the hill.
Yeah, I think his head got too big for him, and
after that,
see you later.
After that big season, and he kept wanting the big money, and then they kind of Wes Welkered him to say. Obviously out of there, but basically just, not giving him the carries, not giving him the work in Cleveland, and letting him go elsewhere. No real, maybe some fantasy value here. Maybe he steals 3 to 4 goal line touchdowns this year if he signs with the Buccaneers. Nothing I'm worried about with Doug Martin, though. I think this is I think there's a 10% chance that he gets those 3 or 4 touchdowns this year.
Yeah, not an issue at all. We can move on from that guy.
Yeah. So every pod we ask you guys for your questions. We ask you to send them on Twitter to hashtag Blindside Pod. We had one question this week. Pick one handcuff, 8th round or later, that will be on a championship fantasy football team. I think that's a tough one, Matt. Who do you got?
You asked me the question earlier, so thank you for that, letting me prepare just a little bit, but it took me just a few seconds. I'm thinking Fred Jackson for me.
Ooh, an oldie.
Yeah, it's obviously take a complete guess. You're relying on an injury pretty much. But yeah, I think Fred Jackson, he's a guy, obviously the starter ahead of him is a questionable guy as far as staying healthy throughout college and the NFL career so far, and Fred's a guy who seems to just keep producing when he gets the opportunities. I think if C.J. Spiller was not around, he'd be still a guy you're talking about. So I like Fred Jackson there. What about you, Marcus?
It's tough because when you're talking handcuffs, you're talking about a guy that is either going to steal the lead job or get the lead job because of injury.
Yep.
So you really, I guess more times than anything, it's if the guy's going to be on a championship team, it's because the number one guy got injured, not because he got the starting job.
I don't think a handcuff would be defined as a guy who could steal a starting job, would it?
Well, like, for example, the Monty Ball, Ronnie Hillman thing. Let's just say Hillman's the backup, he's the handcuff.
I suppose, yeah.
I think for these purposes, for being on a championship team, we're not talking about a guy like Hillman that's going to push for the starting job. I think it's going to be more injury related and someone that's going to come in for an injured guy and kind of contribute.
Yeah. That's why I said Fred.
So I'm thinking of 2 guys for 2 totally, I think, different reasons here. Number 1, Bryce Brown, just because he showed last year what he can do when he's the guy.
Yeah.
And in a Chip Kelly offense,
he is a stud.
Is he a stud, Matt?
Stud. Love him. But I love LaShawn, too.
I love LaShawn this year, but I think in a Chip Kelly offense with as many times as they're going to run the ball, he'll get production week to week. And I think if McCoy misses even a single game, we could see 25 and 30 carry games from Bryce Brown. I think he could be big time. And just if McCoy is out multiple weeks, he's a running back 1. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. The second guy, I think you're going to laugh at me quite considerably, and this is more to do with his offensive line, I feel, than anything, and the quarterback scenario. But I'm going to go with Sean Green. I think they've rebuilt that offensive line, and they have a commitment to running the ball. And I think if anything, I think as it stands, he's going to be probably the goal line guy and get maybe 8 to 10 touchdowns this year. But I think if Chris Johnson misses any serious time, he's going to get the 20 carries a game that Chris Johnson gets, and he's going to get all the goal line work. He's going to be the bell cow back getting all the goal line stuff.
Yeah.
Who's going to push him for carries if Chris Johnson's hurt? Okay. And Chris Johnson getting hurt is a possibility. I mean, he's a guy that is a small guy that, is very fast, very quick, but could easily pull a hamstring or get hit in the knee or have something happen, very Jamal Charles-like. So I think Sean Green could be the guy that, comes in and is going to get those 20 carries a game. He's not going to be a guy that, they turn the ball into a running back by committee backfield.
I don't like how you use specific examples. What if one of those actually happens? There'll be some questions to be answered.
Yeah, maybe I'll just go Nancy Kerrigan on Chris Johnson as much as I love him this year.
So you're
sneak up on him and whack him in the knee.
Your answer was so smart. I'm gonna look.
That's how I do this.
Look into this.
That's how I win leagues. I mean, speaking of which, I actually read. This is really funny. Speaking of ways to win your leagues, I read an excerpt from Matthew Berry's The Fantasy Life, and it talked about legal ways to cheat in your leagues. And I was reading about how this one guy was in a fantasy baseball league, and he worked for the Florida Marlins, and basically he was in his championship game in fantasy baseball and needed to pick up a starting pitcher who was going to pitch really well to kind of help him, give him that boost for the pitching totals. So being that the season was well in hand for the Marlins and they had absolutely no chances of making the playoffs, and these games meant absolutely nothing for the Marlins, he was able to get a couple of Marlins players out that night for a few drinks and started buying them drinks at the local bar and buying them more and more and more drinks. And they ended up calling over some more of the Marlins players over, and
that's awful.
Had more and more drinks, and I guess it's all detailed out in Matthew Berry's book, but it actually goes into the date of the game and the statistics. It has the scorecard in it, and if you actually looked at him, he picked up the opposing team's starting pitcher, and that pitcher won the next day 12 to nothing.
That's
so
funny.
He had a dominant performance, only allowing 2 hits in like 8 innings.
Barely, he's a whistle.
Yeah, he really is. Oh. No, he asked for people for their amazing stories, and that guy obviously provided that to him.
But one other thing, I don't know if you've talked about this last week, but who was it? MJD came out saying he talked with Greg Jones in the huddle once about we gotta wow, that's funny.
Yeah, we didn't go over that in the podcast last week.
How did we not bring that up?
Well, we went mostly over
fantasy football's all over the place, people.
We went over the mock draft mainly, but MJD kind of saying that he was playing against one of his offensive linemen in fantasy football and obviously owned himself, and his offensive lineman was like, "No, I'm not going to block for you on this play, so you don't score a touchdown and beat me in fantasy football." And MJD kind of came out and said afterwards that it was all a joke and it was all in jest, but I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't some truth to that maybe he slipped and said it. The guy's not with the team anymore, and I'm sure stuff like this happens in the NFL. I mean, they're guys too, and you got to realize, off the top of my head, MJD is 26, 27? He's a young guy. I mean, they think about what we used to do when we were 26 or 27 and things like this.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years for you, more for me. I'm an old guy. But I guess that pretty much does it for this podcast. You got anything else, Matt?
No, that's about it.
All right,
we'll be back.
Yeah,
see you guys soon.
Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Marcus Katkin and follow Matt at Matt Dugal, and that's it, guys. We're out.
Get those questions in.
Yo, check it. It's my time. I'm rapping about Blindside, fantasy football podcast in this rhyme because they got me the inside scoop on Adrian Peterson. Yeah, he's that dude on Cam Newton. Yeah, they give me the news more on Megatron, Calvin Johnson if I stay tuned. On all quarterbacks, RG3 happens to be the fastest QB in the league. In fact, Colin Kaepernick is rider QB for them 49ers. It ain't hard to see, Some awesome people hosting Marcus Katkin and Matt Dugal. You should be joining. Skinny or fat, short or tall, anyone can tune in to Blindside Football. Have a try, dude. Listen on iTunes or blindsidefootball.com.